Hello. In the previous video, we have modeled the structure and a portion of behavior for the Arbiter case study. Now in this video, we will be modeling the remaining behavior for Arbiter case study. So we have modeled the behavior of Arbiter till here, as you can see. Now we need some decision node, because the decision node basically decides between one of the outgoing transitions. So from master 2 to idle 2, there will be a decision that whether a master 2 is done with using the bus or not. If it is done, then the done signal we have declared in the structure, as you can see here, the done signal will get high. And if it is not done, then it will remain in the state master 2. And when it is done, then the done signal will get high and it will go to the idle 2 state. Similarly for master 1 and idle 1, and master 3 and idle 3. So we need 3 decision nodes for respective masters and idle states. So to add a decision node, go to the node section of the palette here, search for the choice pseudostate, which is basically the decision. Here is the choice pseudostate. Just drag from the palette and drop it onto the state machine. It will then ask you for the name. You can name it whatever you want. I'm not using any name, so okay. Now the incoming transition from master 2 to decision node. Then so we need a transition for that from master 2 to decision node. So go to the edges section of the palette here. Here is the transition. Just drag and drop it onto the state or pseudo state, or state or pseudo state, or whatever from where you want the transition to next state. So I want the transition from master 2 to decision node. So master 2, just drop it onto the master 2 and then finish it on choice pseudo state. Okay, transition has now been created. There is no condition on this on this transition because it will treat it as master 2 state. So from master 2 it is on decision whenever the system comes in master 2 state, it will automatically come to the decision node here, and then the outgoing transition will have basically have a guard and trigger conditions. So we need 2 transition. One goes to idle 2 state and another will go to the master 2 state again. So when when master 2 is basically done with using the bus, then the done signal will get high, and this transition from decision node to idle 2 state will occur. Otherwise, the transition from decision node to master 2 will occur and the system will remain in master 2. So we need 2 transitions. One is, so to go to the edges section of the palette here, select the transition. So I need the transition from decision box to edges to idle 2 here. This is one transition, and another transition from here and decision node to master 2 again. Okay. Now this transition will have a condition that done signal is high. And the system goes to idle 2 state. So we need to trigger it on done signal. So to trigger it on done signal, select the transition, go to the UML tab of the properties, scroll down. Here is the trigger section, click this button, and then we need to trigger it on done port. So in the port section, click this button. A new window will come up. Then search for the port. Here is the done port. Then select this port, click this forward arrow button. Okay, now the port is shown here. It means that this transition will be triggered on the done port. Okay, and the condition there is that done signal should be high. So to add a trigger, select this transition. To add a guard condition, select this condition, select this transition, then go to guard section here and select this button. We need to add a constraint only. So select constraint, then the constraint element would be, then it will ask you for the constraint element and specification. Context will be set automatically, so we do not need to set any context here. It will automatically set the context as this transition. So constraint element, to add constraint element, click this button. The constraint element would be done signal, done port. So browse for the done port. Here it is. Select this, click this button, and okay. Now the done is shown in the constraint element. The specification will be literal boolean and it will be true. Then done signal is high and the system will go to the idle 2 state. Otherwise it will go to the master 2 state. So on this transition we will be having a condition that done signal should be false. So we also have to trigger it on done port. So go to the UML section of the properties. Here's the trigger section, click this button, and then we need to add port, click this button, search for the done port. Here it is, select the done port, click this forward arrow button, and okay, port is shown here, and then okay. Now the guard condition on this transition will be, the guard condition basically is the condition which must be true for the transition to occur. So the guard condition will be basically that done signal should be false. So click this button, then constraint, then it will ask you for the constraint element and specification. The constraint element would be done signal, done port, Here it is, click this, then this button, and okay. Now the literal boolean specification will be literal boolean and it will be false. Okay, and okay. Similarly, we will be having same conditions for these masters and idle, master 1 and master idle 1, master 3 and idle 3, same conditions. So the same procedure will be followed again. We need a choice pseudostate from the palette. Okay, do not want to use any name. Okay, now we need a transition from master 2 to master 1 to choice pseudostate. Then we need another transition from the palette. Select the transition from choice pseudostate to idle 1. Then another transition from the palette and from the choice pseudostate to master 1. Okay, now the same conditions as we have applied here and here, the same condition will be applied here and here. So select this transition, go to UML section, trigger it on basically done port, browse for done. Here it is, then click this button. Remember to click this button is must, otherwise it will not be triggered on this port or whatever port you want to select. So this After selecting the port, you have to click this button. Okay, and okay, the trigger has been created. Now the guard condition is that done should be true, or in other words, done port should be high. To add a constraint, go to the UML properties tab, click this button, and then select constraint. Then the constraint element. To add the constraint element, click this button, and the constraint element would be done port. Here it is, and then click this button. Okay, and okay. Oh, sorry, we need to add the condition that done should be false. So I forgot to add that condition. So to edit the constraint, click this button. Now the constraint window will be opened. Now you can edit it here. Now you can see that the context has been set automatically. So to add a specification, click this button, literal boolean, and the done should be true. So check true here, and then okay and okay. Now the guard is written in the square brackets. Now we have to trigger it on this transition on done, and the condition would be false. That done should be false. Select this transition, go to UML properties tab. Here is the trigger section. Click this button, and then browse for the port from here, and then here is the recent selection done. Okay, this is done signal, done port. Then click this button, and then okay and okay. Now the condition is basically that done should be false. To add a condition, go to guard section of the properties here, click this button, add a constraint only, and then the constraint element. To add a constraint element, click this button. Here the constraint element would be done port. So here is the done port. Select the done port and click this forward arrow button, and okay. Now the specification is that done should be false. So to add a specification, click this forward plus button in the specification, then literal boolean, and then it will be false. Okay and okay. So the same procedure will be followed for these master and idle states. We need a choice pseudo state. Go to the node section of the palette. Here is the choice pseudo state. Drag and drop it onto the state machine. I do not want to use any names, so delete the default name and enter. Now we need some transitions. So to select for transition, go to the edges section of the palette. Here it is. Just drag the transition onto the master 3 to choice pseudo state. Okay. Now another transition, go to the edges section, select transition, and from choice pseudo state to idle 3, and then another transition from choice pseudo state to master 3. Okay. Now these two transitions will again have the same conditions and triggers. So to add the trigger and guard condition on this transition, select this transition, go to UML section of the properties, and then scroll down. Here is basically the trigger. Click this button, and then search for the port from here. Then done will be the port on which we want to trigger this transition. Here is the done port. So select that port, click this button, and then okay. And then okay. The trigger has been created. Now the guard condition will be that done should be true. So to add a guard condition, here is the guard section. Click this button and add a constraint only. Then it will ask you for the constraint element and specification. To add a constraint element, click this button. The constraint element here would be the done port. So here's the done port. Select that port and click this button, then okay. The specification would be basically that now to add a specification, click this button. It will then ask you for the different possibilities. select the literal boolean, and the done should be true for this transition. Then select true and then OK. Now done should be true is the basically condition, and then OK. Now this transition will be triggered on done, and the condition would be done should be false. So select this condition, go to UML section of the properties. Here is the trigger section. To add a trigger, click this button, and then click this button to add a port for trigger. The trigger will be done here, done port here. Click this button and OK, and OK. Now the guard would be that done should be false. So to add a constraint, click this button, add a constraint. The constraint element would be done. Here is the done, then click this button and then OK. Now to add a specification that done should be false, go to this section, click this button, then go for literal boolean, and done should be false, and then click OK. Okay. Now there will basically, when the system gets reset, it doesn't matter whether the system is in master 2 state or idle 2 state or master 1 state or idle 1 state or master 3 state or idle 3 state, it will go back to the idle state on reset. So we have to basically mention that behavior as well, that if the system is in master 2 state, then it will go to the idle state here. Any of these states, if the system is in any of these states and the reset happens, then the system would go to the idle state here. So we need transitions for that. To select the transition, go to the here edges section of the palette here, select the transition, and from master 2 to idle 2. This is basically the transition, and it will be triggered on the reset port, and the condition would be that reset should be false. Remember, reset is equal to false here means that the system is in reset condition, or in other words, the system gets reset, because the reset is taken as active low here, which means that on low signal the system will get reset. So select this transition, go to UML properties tab here, then go to trigger section here, click this button, then you need to add a port to on which we want to trigger this transition. Now to add a port, click this button and search for the reset port. Here is the reset port, click this and then forward arrow button and then OK and OK. Now the condition is that reset should be false, which ultimately means that reset is high. High means that reset is working at that time. Now to add a constraint, click this button and then constraint, and then it will then ask you for the constraint element. To add a constraint element, click this button and then search for the reset. The constraint element would be reset port. Then here is the reset, click this and then forward arrow button and OK, and the specification would be that reset should be false. Now in the specification section, go to this button and then select literal boolean and false, then OK and OK. Now from the idle 2 state, we also need a transition from idle 2 to idle state. So to add a transition, go to palette section and then edges. Here's the transition from idle 2 to idle state. Okay, now we need to trigger this transition on reset, and the same condition as reset should be false. So the same procedure, click this, select this transition here, go to UML properties tab, and then go to trigger section, then click this button to add trigger. The new window will come up for creation of new trigger. Then we need to trigger it on reset port. From here you can search for the reset port. Here is the reset port in the recent selections, because we have recently selected reset port. You can select it from here as well. Okay, then this button, and then OK and OK, and the condition is that reset should be false. To add a condition, go to this section, that is a guard section, click this button, and we need to add just constraint. Click constraint. It will then ask you for the constraint element and specification. In the constraint element section, here the constraint element would be reset port, of course. To add a reset port, click this button. Here is the reset port. Select reset port and then click this forward arrow button and then OK. And in the specification is that reset should be false. Literal boolean and then false. OK and OK. Now we need a transition from master 1 to idle else also. So for that, go to the edges section of the palette here, select the transition, and from master 1 to idle, and we need to trigger it on also on reset port, and the condition on reset would be false. Go to the UML section of the properties, click this plus button in the trigger section to add a trigger, then this plus button for port. Here is the reset port, then forward arrow button and OK. The trigger has now been created. You can see that. Now the condition would be that reset should be false. To add a condition, click this button, add constraint, then the constraint element would be reset from here. Here is the reset, click this forward arrow button and OK. And the condition would be that reset should be false. To add a specification, click this button and then literal boolean and then false and OK. Similarly, from idle 1 to idle also. So from transition, select this transition from the edges section of the palette, and then from idle to idle. You can basically position it also from here. Okay, now this transition would also be triggered on the reset, and the condition would be same, that is false. So to select this transition, go to the UML section of the properties and then go to trigger section, click this button, then port, then reset, click this button and OK and OK. So I'm doing it a bit quick because we have already done a lot for trigger and guard conditions, so hopefully it is a bit clear. So I'm doing it a bit quick now. Now to add a constraint, go to this section of the UML tab of the properties, click this button, plus button in the guard section, and then only constraint, and then constraint element. From this button, constraint element would be reset because the condition is there on reset. Then click this button and OK. And in the specification would be literal boolean false. OK. Now we need another transition from master 3 to idle. So for that, go to this section of the palette. Here is the transition, and from master 3 to idle. So okay. Now this transition would also be triggered on reset, and the condition would be false also. So here is the trigger. Click this button and then port and then reset. Click this button and OK. And the condition would be that reset should be false. OK. Constraint element would be reset. OK. And the specification would be that literal boolean and false. OK. I'm sorry I'm doing it a bit quick because I've already explained in all these transitions that how the trigger and guard conditions will be added. It is just the same as we have done here and here. So now now we need another transition from idle 3 to idle. So to add transition, here is the transition. Select the transition and from idle 3 to idle. Now this will also be triggered on reset. Here is the trigger section. Click this plus button and then search for the port. Here is the reset port. Click this button and then OK and OK. And to add a guard condition, click this button, add only constraint. The constraint element would be reset. OK, and the specification would be literal boolean and false. OK and OK. OK. Now we have a small portion of FSM left, which will be explained in the next video. So thank you.